Like most Canadians, I embrace the welcoming status quo in this country towards immigration and legitimate refugees. Even though my family has been here for 5 generations, I never forget that this country took us in when we had nothing and gave us everything. I want more people to have those same opportunities. Canadians' openness to immigration, however, is no permanent fact or constitutional obligation. It is a vulnerable and changeable state of public opinion. The majority favors immigration. A sizable minority does not. A relatively small shift could undermine the reigning consensus. That consensus is endangered by illegal border crossings by thousands of refugee claimants. Advocates of liberal immigration are foolish to downplay this danger. Public support is premised on an orderly and fair immigration system designed and run by Canadians in the interests of Canadians. Once people become convinced the system is being bypassed and that immigrants are increasingly self-selecting and queue jumping, the public support will be at risk. Look no farther than the United States for evidence of this. America, too, has always been a country welcoming of immigrants, but U.S. authorities increasingly lost control of the borders. The result? Americans found that there were roughly 14 million people who were not chosen by U.S. authorities, but had simply let themselves in. The public rebelled. Canadians contemptuous of Americans' recent hostility to illegal immigration should try this thought experiment. Imagine a proportionate number of illegals in Canada, or about 1.4 million people, most of whom would be in Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal, competing for jobs, housing, and social services. Immigration-friendly Canada would not survive. That's the danger represented by Roxham Road and other places where a steadily growing stream of people is entering Canada in defiance of the rules. Don't be distracted by the red herring that this is about refugees and not immigration. Under the Canadian rules, we mostly choose which refugees to admit to Canada as much as we choose other kinds of immigrants. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's promise in the last election was not to admit the first 25,000 serious refugees to show up on our doorstep, but rather to speed up Canada's process for choosing which refugees to admit. It's true, we don't choose those who show up asking for asylum at the border. On the other hand, we are under no international obligation to accept people who show up at the border when they arrive from a country like the United States, where their life and liberty are not in danger and their refugee claim would be properly adjudicated. We rightly turn such people back. Apologists for the illegal entrance to Canada rely on public distaste for the Trump administration and its rhetoric around illegal immigration. But the United States remains a society governed by the rule of law, as shown by the court's manhandling of much of President Trump's immigration policy. Until a Canadian court rules otherwise, it is reasonable and proper for Canada to turn back refugee claimants trying to enter from the United States. One government minister estimates that as many as 90% of those entering illegally or irregularly will eventually have their refugee claim rejected. Another source says 2/3 of Nigerian claimants are being rejected. Yet as of last May, barely 1% of the 26,000 irregular border crossers who have entered since 2017 have been removed. And Canada's record of ensuring the removal of people not entitled to be here is less than impressive. People cross illegally from the United States because they thereby evade Canada's rules about turning back refugee claimants from that country. By accommodating them with housing, social services, and in many cases work permits, Ottawa is rewarding cheating by people who would be turned back at official border crossings. Many will turn out to be economic migrants, masquerading as refugees to jump the queue at the expense of both taxpayers and those legitimate refugees and immigrants waiting to enter Canada. Regardless of the share of these illegal entrants finally accepted as bona fide refugees, the fact is they are purposely doing an end run around the rules, causing us to lose control of the border. This is playing both with fire and with the liberal Canadian consensus on immigration. I'm Brian Lee Crowley for the Macdonald-Laurier Institute.